Howdy all, welcome back to Red at the Wire. Well, we're finally ready to unveil our Elements of Handicapping series, and we're going to begin with part number 1, and this will focus on form. And as I mentioned, we're going to handle all 4 corners of handicapping a race: form, class, speed, and pace, as they apply to the Kentucky Derby contenders. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, let's begin our Elements of Handicapping, and we're just a little synopsis that we're going to evaluate the Kentucky Derby field contenders and utilizing 4 corners of race handicapping. That's form, class, speed, and pace. And we will begin with part number 1, which is form. And we're going to evaluate each contender's performance to date, meaning how they've done in the Derby preps and how that it should impact their run in the Kentucky Derby. So we'll look at number 1, Forte. He is a pace presser, tends to rate about mid-pack, and he's had 7 starts, hasn't done anything wrong. He's got 6 firsts and I believe a 4th. He's won the Florida Derby and Fountain of Youth this year, and of course the Breeders' Cup Juvenile last year. So hasn't done anything wrong. The only thing I would say is perhaps he is plateauing a little bit, but that doesn't mean he's regressing. Very important distinction. So he's more than capable of competing at the Derby level, and he's a solid win candidate. So he gets an A for grade. Angel of Empire is number 2. He's got 6 starts with 4 wins, and the main thing is we've been harping on continuously. He is getting better with every single start. You're really going to see that in the pace numbers. He's won the Arkansas Derby and the Risen Star, and he was 2nd in the Smarty Jones. The important thing to note is he had pace to run to in the Risen Star. He did not really in the Arkansas Derby, and he won both ways. So he's got versatility, and he's demonstrated the type of acceleration necessary to win the Derby, and he obviously loves 2 turns, so he gets an A. Tapit Trice is kind of the now horse, and deservedly so. He's got a lot of talent. He's demonstrated that in his last couple. He's got 5 starts, and he's taken a little while. He's getting into himself. We know this. The Tampa Derby had to be a pretty Herculean effort because he put himself in such a bind with a bad break, or slow break rather, and not getting engaged in the race. He did remedy that in the Bluegrass Stakes rather impressively. He broke better. He handled kickback. He got to where he needed to. The only thing about him is there's still that little mental distraction type of issue that you saw that even with the dueling with Verifying, where you'd think that's all he'd be thinking about, he still found time to look into the stands. So just a little bit of a problem that hopefully will be corrected, because certainly when you're a little fragile mentally, there's a lot of distractions on Derby Day, and we always have to keep that in mind with this one. So he gets an A-, but I think he's certainly trending in the right direction. Dermiso Dagaki, I've looked at this one about as closely as I can. I've watched 4 of his Derby preps. This one, we all looked at the UAE Derby that he won so impressively, but he's been coming from mid-pack or up near the lead in his other 3 starts. So he's got a lot of versatility, and it's not a given that he's going to take the lead, though it seems more than likely. I think looking at at the way he won the UAE Derby, drawing off as he did, I certainly think that while he may not be an absolute win candidate here, he is definitely a contender to be sure. And the only reason he gets an A- is I'm just not sure what he's beating over there. Mandarin Hero validated the Japanese horses a little bit, but again, as we've said, I don't know how good the California horses are really. So it to me, it's not that much of a validation. It's a little bit, but not much. This one clearly, we'll see how he trains, but this is definitely one to think about. Practical Move hasn't done anything wrong this year. He won the Santa Anita Derby, won the San Felipe, and he won the Los Al too, all around 2 turns. We do know that there's a little bit of a reservation as far as his ability to get 1.25 miles, but he has saved ground as a pace presser up near the lead in each start this year. He's hugged the rail, and he's finished, drew off when he had to. Santa Anita Derby was A little troubling because it did look like he was begging for the finish line. He looked like he was all out. But so far, he hasn't done anything wrong. I'm not sure what he's beating in California. I think that's the big issue for me, is I just don't know how classy the California horses are. They have not shipped very well. So he gets a B+, just a couple notches off because of the class level and his capability potentially at 1.25 miles. Two Phils has had a pretty good year. He's the grinder in the bunch. He just kind of hangs in there and competes every single time, and you got to love that. He appears to be getting better with each start. The Jeff Ruby Stakes makes it kind of hard to evaluate how much he improved because it was on synthetic, but it was clearly an impressive race. And this one's certainly on the upswing. He's going to rate behind the leaders somewhere. Could be mid-pack, could be a little closer, depending on what Jared Loveberry wants to do. I'm not sure 1.25 miles is exactly what this one wants, and I think he's a little bit of a cut below some of the better contenders here, and that's why he's getting a B. But he definitely brings it every time, and he's got that competitive zeal that you like to see in a horse. So he, Two Phils, gets a B. Hit Show has been maligned, by me and others, because he raced in New York, where he wasn't facing a whole lot. But the fact of the matter is, he's done what he was supposed to do. That Withers Stakes, he won drawing off against not very much, granted, but that's what you want to see a horse do. He wasn't challenged. The Wood Memorial, he had a lot of strikes against him. He had an outside post. He had traffic issues. He had a lot of problems. And yet he was still able to get up, and he damn near won the race. And he finished in a 3-way photo. So no knocks there. And in fact, I think he's maybe getting better. And that's really the most important thing. So he gets a B+, mainly because I think that Wood was a really nice effort, and it does show progression to me. He gets a couple of knocks because of the class of horses he's been racing against. But I think Hit Show is definitely a contender, and I think he's in good form. Kings Barnes, I just don't know what to make of him. I really don't. The only real reference point you have is the Louisiana Derby as far as the stakes race goes, and a Derby prep, and he won it. So you got to give him credit for that. He took what they gave him. They allowed him to get onto a soft pace, so he took it. Not going to blame him for that. But as far as how competitive he is, I don't know. We haven't really seen him with dirt in his face. We haven't really seen him where he's had to fight to win. And we don't know about his stamina, really. We think he's pretty good that way, but we really don't know because, of course, he's going to be able to close easily at 1 mile and 3/16 when he doesn't have to run on the front end. Any horse, even sprinters, would be able to do that. So it's not that much of a feather in his cap. For that reason, he gets a C+. He would really be more of a C because I just don't know what to do with him. But he gets a plus because he did win the Louisiana Derby. If you look back at his other allowance races, you find markedly different pace scenarios and form than you do in the Louisiana Derby. And that we'll get to that when we get to the pace section. But this one is a real puzzler, and I'm just not even sure if he belongs in this race, to be honest. Mage is one of our rising stars, and he's kind of the Taba of this year, I guess. He's only had 3 starts, but boy, have they been pretty darn good. The Fountain of Youth, he broke lousy, and he still was able to rush up and hang on for 4th. But really, the Florida Derby is what I think put his stamp on him being a Derby contender. That was a fabulous race. He did not break well, and yet he made a middle move to take over the race, busted open, and if it wasn't for Forte's class, he would have won the race. It was extremely impressive, and he appears to be improving steadily. Gustavo Delgado horses generally do. And so this is all systems a go for this one. He gets a B mainly because he doesn't have a whole lot of foundation. He's only his 3rd start. Was the Florida Derby. So a little bit, I'd like to see him have a little more under the belt, but you can't deny that he's a contender and he's trending upward in the right direction. So I'm pretty excited to see what this one's going to do next. Verifying is been kind of a weird one this year. Had that he's debuted with a really smart allowance victory where he dusted Gun Pilot and Two Eagles River. But then Rebel Stakes and Crash. Just a lousy ride by Florent Giroux. You see he's not on him for this one. Brad Cox is going to Tyler Gaffleone. And Giroux isn't riding very much for Brad Cox lately, so that kind of tells you something. But pretty lousy ride. Still, he hung in there for fourth against a hot pace. So it wasn't a bad effort. The Bluegrass Stakes, he definitely validated that he belongs, I think, with an outstanding effort. And, he got in a duel with Tapit Trice. And he looked, I think he maxed out. That was the only thing about it. He looks like he hit his top end in that duel. I don't know that he's going to go any faster. And certainly at a greater distance, that does give you a pause. But I think he does belong in this race. What's going to improve his chances if we get to the point where we pretty much figure out the pace is going to be slow or moderate. We're not it looks that way right now, but we're not totally sure that that's going to be the case. But the slower it is up front, the better his chances are. He gets a B- mainly because of that Rebel Stakes was just sort of just a goofy race, really. And I don't know that we saw a whole lot from him there, but the Bluegrass brings him back up. So he gets a B-. I think we have to consider this one. Disarm is another late bloomer coming, in a sense. He did race it too, and pretty impressively at Saratoga, but had a long layoff. And they've sort of been playing catch-up with him training-wise. We've noted that all the way along, that he hasn't been getting breaks between starts. They've been just keep continuing to work him. That's really why he gets a C from me, because they seem to be trying to rush him along, and I just have a feeling it's going to come back and bite him. Right now, it isn't. He did well in the Louisiana Derby when they rushed him, and he came right back and got a third in the Lexington. The Lexington was not a great race. I don't know that we saw anything. I don't think he didn't have to win it. We all know that. So whether or not he was tuned up all the way, I don't know. He did show a turn of foot. He's shown he's got ability at 2 turns. I think he's going to relish the 1.25 mile distance. So he gets a C for form basically just because of the late start he got on the Derby Trail, and the Lexington really was kind of, an average race. But he'll be better than that. It will just he seems to be training well, and I think he belongs in this field. Reincarnate, we keep waiting, don't we? He just hasn't materialized into that world beater that he looked like he was going to be in the Sham Stakes. The Sham was we have to remember that was a Bob Baffert Invitational, and it was a paid workout per se. And since he's had to face Real Stakes Company in the East, in Arkansas, he's been okay. But that's all you can say. I mean, he's shown some versatility, being able to rate as well as come from off the pace. And so that's a good thing. And particularly in the Derby, that's a very positive quality. But I don't know that he has shown that he really is a top flight win candidate. And so that's why he's starting to look more like he's a cut below. And that's kind of why he gets a C from me. But one thing to note, and we're going to get into, incidentally, all the stuff on the left side that you're seeing, we're going to get into all that when we start talking about class. So you pedigree hounds, be patient. In the next section, we're going to get to all that. One thing I will note about him, though, he is an April foal, which means he just turned 3. So there may be some room for growth there. And so we always have to kind of keep that in the back of our minds, that he's still growing, and he's a little behind some of the other horses in this race. He clearly has the stamina to go in 1.25 miles. I'm just not sure, competitive-wise, whether or not he stacks up with the better horses here. Rocket Can has been, another one that they sort of got onto the Derby Trail kind of late, it seems, and they started the Holy Bull where he got a nice win, and he made a big jump in progression. Did the same thing in the Fountain Youth. Arkansas Derby, I think he hit the wall. I think that's where his growth is going to stop. That's what it looks like to me, and that's kind of why he gets a C. If we had seen another step forward in the Arkansas Derby, he certainly would have been upgraded a little farther. He has rated and hung with some of the better horses, but the last couple, he's getting further and further behind. It looks like he's working a little harder to stay up with them. That's not a very good sign. He was a cut below to begin with, and he might be a little lower than that based upon that Arkansas Derby. They're going to put blinkers on him, I think, for the Derby, but an equipment change at this point is not a good sign, and so he gets a C. Lord Miles has been under the radar for the whole Derby season for the most part until the Wood Memorial. You could see he's had 4 Derby preps, and it's taken him a little while to get going, but he has been improving steadily, albeit under the radar. And that Wood Memorial, I think he finally started to put it together. So clearly he's been a disappointment for the 3 prep races prior to that, particularly the Holy Bull. We thought he was going to emerge, and he didn't, even though the race set up for him. So it's taken this one a little while to figure it out, but he seems to have gotten it, and that was a pretty impressive Wood Memorial. And it's I don't know that it would be the kind of effort that wins the Kentucky Derby, but he's on his way. That's the most important thing to note. He gets a C+ because he's been subpar for the prior prep races, but he gets a plus because he won the Wood Memorial. I think this one is one you want to keep an eye on, and I think he's going to be a pretty good fit when it comes down to it. So let's keep an eye on Lord Miles. Sun Thunder is another one that almost seems like he's kind of plateaued. He showed a lot of promise early in his career. I was pretty excited about this one. And the Southwest Stakes in the mud, I mean, nobody was going to beat Arabian Night that day, but he didn't finish quite as strong as I thought he might. Risen Star, he got the rail trip. He was able to save a lot of ground, and he had a pretty good pace to run to, and consequently, he got a nice second. The Bluegrass Stakes, though, he kind of did what he always seems to do. He had a mile close along the rail, and he ended up 4th. So this one, I think, with a pace to run to, certainly you'd have to upgrade his chances. But if it's going to be slow or moderate, you can't really like this one as a competitor at all. So he's kind of, he's kind of in the middle there, and that's why I give him a C. I think he's a little bit of a cut below, but we'll see as we dig a little deeper into his pace numbers and perhaps his class to see if perhaps we might upgrade him a little bit. Right now, he's kind of, as far as form goes, I think he's middle of the road, tending towards a toss. Continuar, I mean, I don't know a whole lot about this one. From what I've gathered, he's a grinder. He doesn't have a lot of early foot or turn of foot. He just kind of hangs around and grinds. So that can be very good for the Derby. It can also suck for the Derby. If you want this horse to get into 3rd or 4th by just simply staying past some of the ones who are tiring, then he's your guy. If you want him to win the race, not very likely. That type of style is better suited for the Belmont. The Derby, I don't see this one as a viable win candidate. Still, he did get 3rd in the UAE Derby, and he got 5th in the Saudi Derby, so he's done pretty well. We don't really know how classy they are, or how competitive the Japanese horses will be. We kind of think they're going to be, but that's really all we've got right now. So he gets a C, right in the middle of the road. I tend to think he's a little bit of a cut below from what I gather, but I think he's one that you can think about for the exotics, but I would not consider this one a win candidate. We'll look at him a little more deeply as we go on. Race Kane has been a disappointment. I thought he was all systems were go for him to move forward. The gun runner, he looked pretty competitive, but the Gotham, he won it, okay, but what did he beat? They were all sprinters. It was in the mud, and it was a suicide pace. So he closed it to a suicide pace. Now, he did draw off, so that's impressive. But, he followed up with a 2-turn clunker in the Bluegrass. He just really didn't do a lot of running and got a kind of a lousy 5th. So that's why he gets a C-, because he really didn't run against much in his first 2, and he finally got some competitive horses to run against. in the bluegrass, and he finished was so-so. So late running style maybe helps his chances a little bit, but I think this one's a cut below, and coming into the Derby, I think his form is a little suspect. We'll see how he trains, but I don't really like this one's chances. Confidence game. The Rebel Stakes, I think, as I belabored, is I think the best this one can do. He ran a really nice race. He has never been, 7 starts, he's been in the money in 6 of them. So let's give him some credit there for sure. The Lecomte, he didn't do too badly. And that race was validated by Instant Coffee and 2 fills, and it's become a key race. So, and then once he won the Rebel Stakes, validated a little further. However, that race, he looked all in to get a mile and a 16th there, and he was drifting out, not changing leads. Those are all signs that horse is running as much as he can. He's maxed out. So is it likely that this one's going to get a mile and a quarter? I don't think so. He gets a B- because he's been competitive, and he did win a Derby prep. I give him the minus because I think it just was an indication of I think that's the best one this one can do. We will look more deeply into the pace numbers and the speed numbers to get a better feel. But form-wise, particularly since he doesn't have a Derby past the Rebels, been training up to it. That's the other thing that's a bit of a concern form-wise. Jason's Road just drew into the race, and we welcome Jason's Road because he's a front runner, and we need early speed in this race for sure. He's had 6 starts this year. He really, he started in the Southwest. The gun runner he won wire to wire. So it was a pretty decent effort against a halfway decent field. So that gave me a sign that there was some ability there. But came right back in the Southwest Stakes and just threw in a clunker. Obviously didn't like it wet, and that was really more the indication than anything else. He wasn't going to beat Arabian Night that day. Nobody was. But the thing that was a bit of a concern is he went right to the bench for a while before he came back in the Louisiana Derby. Finished a decent 3rd. However, that pace was glacial, as we all know, and he couldn't do any better than 3rd. He couldn't turn it on. He couldn't challenge Kings Barnes. I wonder about the distance with this one, and that's a big question mark as far as form goes for me, and that's why he gets a C-, because I'm concerned that he probably doesn't want a mile and a quarter. Wild on Ice is what can you say? That Sunland Derby was just such an aberration of a race. The fractions were absolutely brutal to start, and they finished like it. They just all limped in at the finish. And the big indication more than anything else is right after the finish line, Wild on Ice stopped. No gallop out, no nothing. He was cooked. And so to think that a horse like this who got a 70, I think he got a 77 or 78 buyer, is going to factor in the Derby is highly speculative. So he gets a D+ because he just doesn't belong in this race, in my opinion. And those of you who thinking there's going to be another Rich Strike here, Rich Strike had ability. This one doesn't have the class to handle 2 turns at a mile and a quarter with this field. She's an immediate toss. So let's take a look at what our results from form evaluation have brought us. Our top, we've got 5 that I think we absolutely can use based upon their prior form coming into the race. And they are Forte, Angel of Empire, Tapit Trice, Derma Sotogake, although that is a little speculative, I admit, and Hit Show. Those are ones that I think are coming in, headed in the right direction, who, based upon what they've done, should be competitive in the Kentucky Derby. Possibles now these are ones where there's still a couple of question marks, but have done pretty well and enough to warrant maybe a little more consideration. Practical Move, as we know, distance might be the issue. 2 fills, same thing. Kings Barnes, class, it may be an issue. Speed, don't know. A lot of different things it could be. Mage, just because of the gate issue more than anything else. Verifying because of the top end. Disarm, just because they're rushing his training. reincarnate because he's underachieving, in my view. Lord Miles, we want to consider probably more of a definite than a possible, but the fact that his progression has been rather checkered, let's say. That maybe there's a couple of question marks on him. Continue on because we're not overly certain if he can compete at this level. And Sun Thunder because he's pace dependent, and it would really be a question of how the shape of the race looks if you're going to consider him. So that leaves the tosses. These are horses that their form has just indicated they don't belong in this race or that they won't factor. Rocket Can, I think he's hit the wall. I think he's done as well as he can do. Is it possible that he could, if there's no pace in this race, he could hang around for fourth? Yeah, it is, but it's the Derby. And I just think a lot of horses are going to be stepping up their game, and I'm not sure he can. Raise Kane, he's 2 turns looks like it's not really what he wants right now. So to me, he just doesn't look like he's coming into the race in ideal form. Confidence game because he's training up to the Derby from the Rebel Stakes, didn't have that extra prep that I think perhaps you need. He lost a lot of weight after the Rebel Stakes. It took a lot out of him. And if that's the best he can do, that's not going to be good enough for the Derby. Jason's Road because he has some distance limitations. I think he's going to be a pace factor, but I don't look for him to be there at the end. Wild on Ice just isn't good enough. He doesn't have the class, and he doesn't have the speed. What more can you say? He just doesn't belong in the race. So that's part 1, form of the elements of handicapping. Now, a lot of that is stuff we've covered before, but it's good to take another look and see if their running styles and how they've been running and how it's going to factor in the Derby. We like to leave that possible section there as a way to kind of mix and match depending upon what you think the race shape is going to be, because depending upon what the pace scenario is, we don't want to throw horses out that might be a decent fit for it and otherwise. So that's kind of why we do it that way. And the tosses are obviously just ones that don't stack up on form, and so we wouldn't use them under any circumstances for form. Now, there are 4 elements. So there's class, pedigree, class, pace, and speed we have to think about as well, and we will be covering them in the next couple of parts. Then we're going to wrap it all up into the final synopsis, taking a look at how each contender stacks up in each one of those 4 elements. So this was just one isolated element we looked at. And so if you agree or disagree or whatnot, or think we've missed something, don't worry about it. We're going to get to it in the next part. The other thing I'd just like to say right off the bat, all those numbers you see to the left are mostly pedigree. And I know a lot of you have asked for dosage index, things of that nature, and they're all there. But we're going to cover that in the next section in class. So rest assured, it's not just there for window dressing. It's just kind of to give you an idea of the connections and the basic biographical information as we study each element. So I just want to make that clear. So we will cover that next. If you do like what you see here, please like and subscribe. And of course, we always thank you for your viewership. And we're going to continue with the Keeneland Card Series as well. But we're getting closer, and it's getting more intense. And so our scrutiny is going to get a lot more heightened. And this was an example of it. So I'll see you next with part 2 on class in the elements of handicapping. And until then, be well.